Hello, I've been before, welcome back. If not, hi, my name is David. I make videos talking about media that I want to talk about. This is my reading wrap-up for the month of June, all the books that I read in June. Today I'm joined by Junior, who is a Totodile. Junior because my boyfriend made me take because I never played the Mystery Dungeon Pokemon games. He had me take the personality quiz online, and I got a Totodile. And so he got me this Totodile, and we called it Junior. So like Junior for like David, you know. And then joining us from last month is Sandy, the Avatar of the Hunt. And yeah, we're going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of June. I think I counted 11 books in total. And yeah, so as usual, we'll start in the past and then come to the future, which is now. The first book that I read was Among the Free by Margaret Peterson Haddix, which is the last book in the Shadow Children series. I've been reading this series since late last year, and it's a reread from when I was in like elementary school. I remember reading this in elementary school, and then my parents bought me the box set in like high school because I knew I liked it. But it's just now that I'm able to finally like return to this series. And so this is about the entire series. It's about dystopian USA, where the government has decided that after about a famine that they have to limit the amount of the population. They create the population police, and thus any children that is a third child or fourth child or whatever are illegal. And they use these illegal children as scapegoats for why people went starved, why there was a famine. And so since the beginning, we follow Luke and other third children who try to fight against the government, try to find some freedom, try to undermine the population police. In this final book, we have Luke, who was the main character in the first book, who has infiltrated the population police as of 2-3 books ago. He's just a horse stable boy or whatever, and he is swept up in this new thing that the population police are trying to do, which is go around and force people to give back any of their IDs. And in that, he refuses to kill a woman, an old woman, who refused to follow orders. And because of that, that sets off a domino effect of different people rebelling against the government, which leads to the fall of the population police. I give this a 4 out of 5. I think it should be a little less, but for what it wants to do and what it does to complete the story, I think it's fine. So 4 out of 5, averaging out, you know. The beginning is a bit slow because Luke is just a stable hand, and then the population police are like, hey, we need more hands-on for this mission. And when he flees from the mission after refusing to shoot this woman, he is out in the wilderness, and it is just kind of surviving in the wilderness, and that's a little slow and not as compelling. He has moments where he talks with Jen, who is a third child who was killed in the first book, who went to a protest, and the entire protest was shot down by the population police. Jen, throughout the entire throughout the entire series, Jen is haunting the narrative because her parents, are fighting for the rebellion as well, but they were fighting on a different front than she was. She did not know that they were part of the rebellion. And so she haunts the narrative, haunts Luke constantly. Luke talks to her in the wilderness as she like not guides him, but so much as like supports him, yells at him to like actually do stuff, and it's sort of like a motivator for him. And then once we start getting into like the population police politics, it gets a bit more interesting. We get the return of Oscar, who is a really interesting antagonist that appeared in the fourth book that I really liked, that I was like, oh yeah, this one character is really important for some reason. I don't remember why. And then he doesn't appear again. And I'm like, he takes power here, which is really good. But he uses the population police infrastructure and the officers and stuff, and he still is using the third children as scapegoats and used a lot of propaganda. They like, oh, third children are the reason why you don't have any food. Third children are the reason why population police are so bad, etc. And I think that's a good development because it's like what we wanted or what we thought we wanted, which was the defeat of the population police. Actually, oh no, he's just sort of like replacing the same types of power structures, and it's still the same issue of population police want to kill all their children. And I feel like it would work. It does work. However, I feel like Oscar should have really been built up a lot more since his introduction. So, like, looking at the series overall, it's really good that we ended with Luke, because towards the latter half of the show, I keep saying the show like I'm watching this. At the latter half of the series, the POVs become different characters. In the third book, we get Nina. In the fifth book, we got Trey. Last book, we have Matthias, and we're back to Luke. And the thing is, one of my issues with Among the Enemy, which is the book prior to this, the sixth book, that's it, is that book didn't feel like a or like the last penultimate book to end the series on. It wasn't that it felt rushed, but it definitely felt like there could have been a lot more stepping stones that could have been really interesting. Especially because the first and second books feel like actual true sequels to each other. Third book felt wholly unnecessary, except to introduce new characters that do pop up later. The third book and the sixth book are sort of like sequels to each other. And then the fourth book is my favorite one. And then the fifth book is where we start setting up stuff. I feel like if I would have restructured this, maybe I would have had the first two books in one book, and then had skipped over Nina's book because I did not like that. Among the Barons was really good because we get the introduction of Oscar. We get the introduction of there's a rebellion happening, right? Built up that rebellion, and then with Trey in the fifth book, being able to infiltrate and do espionage, I think that would have been really nice to have. And then have, like, I guess, like, the third book be with Matthias and Luke doing more espionage and breaking down the system and stuff like that. For what it is, it's fine. It's a children's series. It doesn't have to be extremely complex, but it is some really good sci-fi, really good commentary. It's baby's first dystopia, I would say. And the way that it concludes is really good. And I wouldn't say that I absolutely loved the series rereading it, but I was very much happy that I was able to reread it and enjoyed my time reading it. I am passing this down to my sister. If she does not like it, I'm totally fine with keeping the books, but also I want to give it away as well in terms of spreading the message type deal, because this is a good series, but it's for children. It's Margaret Peterson Haddix writes for a lot of young children. I think it's like middle to high school age is supposed to be. But yeah, I feel like because of the concept, I think it requires a lot more than what the target demographic would want. And I'm just wanting more. It's not a fault of the story itself. It's just I am greedy. So, next I read The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, which is the third book in the Poppy War trilogy. Finally, it was able to finish this trilogy. I've been reading this as I read along, and I was absolutely floored about this book. Oh, I forgot to mention also, on my past recent trip to the Pacific Northwest, I had already talked about this. I had read the latest book of my reading of the Expanse series, the second book. On that flight towards, I finished the Expanse, and then I started this book, but I only got into like 20 pages of it, and I finished the rest of it in this month. Technically, still counting it as June. On the flight back, I read this book, and I wasn't able to finish it on the plane, but I had like maybe 100 pages left when I got off, so that's really good accomplishment. This is a 4.5. We follow Rin and her allies as she is trying to grow a power base and fight against the Dragon Republic and other forces, external forces, Western quote-unquote forces that are trying to take over Nicara and to kill her. She is reeling from the betrayal of an ally from the prior book, the second book of the Dragon Republic, and now is trying to face off against him. And I think this is one of the better plots of the entire series. Like, the first book I had issues with because it felt like I was reading 3 different books. The second book, in good contrast, was only just war. And that, while not compelling, really good, really set up. And also, still, in the second book, Rin keeps going through it. She keeps going through it. And this book, as a trilogy, is technically still like war, but there are more different things happening that feel like traditional fantasy plot structure, in that it's sort of like not bops around to different points of view, but different bops around to different goals. And those are really interesting goals as well. And also meeting different characters, losing and gaining allies, etc. Everything is just hitting the right notes in every specific way. That is so good. And again, Rin just goes through it, and that's really fun. Not because I don't like her. I love Rin so much. Rin is one of the best characters I've ever read. R.F. Kuang stays being an amazing writer. And I'm just really happy with the progression of her story. I don't want to say this book was Game of Thrones-esque, but it definitely, like, the way that Rin advances in her position is really interesting because it feels so natural and it doesn't feel forced. Like, I would compare it to how Cersei becomes the queen of Westeros in Game of Thrones, the show, in that the way that she becomes queen is very natural with how the story is progressing. Similarly, Rin, how she advances in power and gains power, is so natural in how the story is advancing. And this is the end of a trilogy. You can tell, you know that this story is going to end somehow. And I like that it's building up to that in a very interesting way. It also ties up some antagonist threads, like the antagonist of the first book, the Empress, and the antagonist of the second book of the Dragon Emperor, Viseira, and then the Hesperians that were introduced in the second book as well. All of those important antagonistic forces that are facing off against Rin are tied up neatly and well. However, I feel like because I was reading this all in one shot, one plane ride, I didn't let myself breathe in between moments. So everything moved not fast, but definitely sudden. Like when she, I'll cover this spoiler in terms of when she kills a specific antagonist that was really important to her, it felt very quick and sudden, but well-deserved, well-timed, well-built up, well-established, and like the moment in of itself, really cool. But as the story kept chugging along and all of these antagonistic threads are tied up, it was like, oh, that's not happening anymore? Okay. Oh, that's done? Okay. And that felt a little, I don't know if it was me, how I was reading it, or that was how it was written. I'm not fully sure. But when we get to it, the ending is absolutely amazing because it does not pull any punches. This story never pulled any punches. From the get-go in the first book, it never pulled any punches, and it kept not pulling punches towards the end of this book, this series. It's so good. And I just really liked how it ended, how it concluded, because it was not good, but it was satisfying. And Rin's story completes in a very satisfying and angry way, and that's who she's always been, angry, and she's forging her own path, and I like that she maintains who she is up until the very end of this book, and I adore that. Also, the way that her relationships grow and fluctuate as well between her allies and her enemies is also really entertaining to watch, really compelling, and that, if anything, the plot, really good structure, but the relationships that grow and change are what kept me wanting to keep going with her. You know what I mean? So I'm really happy that I was finally able to read this entire trilogy. Was it my favorite trilogy? I don't think so. But really good writing. Rin is one of the best characters I've ever read, and I'm very glad to have finally finished The Poppy War. R.F. Kuang, how dare you do that all to her? The next book that I read was The Dead of Summer by Ryan La Sala. This is okay. I've read other Ryan La Sala. I loved The Honeys. I liked Beholder. This is, I think, his third published. I read them accidentally, but not accidentally in chronological order as to them released. I think this is his most recent horror that he released. Loved this book. 5 out of 5. This is about Ollie, real name Orlando, returns to his hometown, which is a tourist island off the coast of Maine that is mainly queer run. This is the map. It's a really fun map. And in this return to the island, there is all of a sudden a zombie apocalypse. That's not specifically zombies, but it's like coral. It's very much in the vein of fungal, zombie fungal horror. Think What Moves the Dead, T. Kingfisher, Last of Us movie, or not, it's not a movie, show and video game, that's it. But instead of being like fungi, it's coral. And I like that it's within this genre that we like recognize, but it's still like doing something new with it. You know what I mean? Sorry, I had to adjust the framing. Anyways, Ollie is going back after his mother miraculously survived cancer, and he had already written off his mother as having died, but when she doesn't die now, he has to go back to where he was born, where he grew up, where he made friends who he cut off in grief and in anger when his mother was about to die. Now returning, he in the middle of the summer, in the dead of summer, he has to, pick up these pieces of his ex-best friends and try to deal with his mother, who has a different output in life because of her survival of the cancer. And then zombies appear. And that's really fun. This was 5 out of 5. It fluctuated between like a 4.5, 4.75 to 5. At the end, it was a 5. I think that an issue that I usually have had with past YA stories, this is technically a YA horror, is that a lot of the focus in the YA story is on the character relationships and not the main conflict. This story doesn't do that. However, I do kind of wish there was a little bit more focus on the character relationships, but that's fine. I can trust. I know that I can trust Ryan La Sala to do that. I think so. Thinking about it, Beholder, one of my issues was that it focused a lot more on the relationship than on the central conflict, but the central conflict was still really well implemented. Honeys had a good balance of both. Here, it was a bit too much horror than, I guess, the romance aspect or just relationship, friendship aspect, but still really good implemented either way, and the horror is amazing. So I just like contradicted myself, Ollie is Ollie is an amazing protagonist as well. You get a good sense of who he is and what he wants to do, and his anger and frustration at how life has shifted and changed before, during, and after his mother's diagnosis. And so, really good character to follow with. And it maintained an emotional core about Ollie and his mother throughout the entire story, which is really good. Once we get into like the actual zombie apocalypse that happens, it's not a zombie apocalypse, it's a zombie outbreak that stays contained within this one island. There are some pacing issues that I noticed in terms of some things to me felt like they ramped up a lot, like really quick, and then like slowed down, and that sort of cut the tension a little bit. But that was just towards the beginning. And as the story was progressing, I had some like personal reading issues in terms of I don't quite know how the plot is going to start or how it's starting or has it started, etc. But once it got going, and I was on the ride. You know what I mean? What I like is that it combines a prose style narrative with a found footage style transcript slash epistolary journal writing that is sort of like the prose is the past, and then the journal slash transcript is in the future. Well, I guess the prose is the past, which is zombie outbreak, and then the present slash future is the journal and the transcripts that sort of tell complementary stories. And when I usually see that in stories, I have this expectation that it is going to be something along the lines of like the future slash present comments on the past. But it started with the past, and then it kept dipping into the future. So it felt like it was bookending in really interesting ways. And it also helped to smooth transitions in terms of there are big gaps of time in things that are happening in this zombie outbreak, and that gap of time is cut by going from the prose to the transcript in terms of, okay, so you were there. Sorry, the journal slash transcript is a scientist assigned to question Ollie after the events, and also do investigation about what has been happening with the island. And they are on a ship off the coast, right? And I think it was like 20 days total that everything happened. When Ollie asked the prose narrator would like talk about something happening, and then it would cut to the scientist, and they would say, "So you and a bunch of survivors were in that house for like 3 days," and that it's a really good like shortening of time, and it happens a handful of other times, a lot smoother than how I could describe it. Also, if anyone has read this book, I don't know why, but I feel like the scientist is a woman. I have no like I tried reading it over like the first few journal entries that they had, and I'm like, I don't know why I immediately thought that this was a woman, but they're a woman to me now. I don't know if you had the same idea. It might be a man. I don't know, which is why it's they. Anyways, this is a really good story. The way that I progressed, the way that it moved was so emotional as well. Also unique. Ryan La Sala keeps being incredibly unique, and I hate you, Ryan La Sala. I hate you for being so unique. Why can't I be that? Why I need to write like you, Ryan La Sala. I need you know. So I was really happy with this book. Also, big surprise that this is, if not a series, at least a duology, in that there is definitely going to be a second book, and trust that when that second book comes out, I'm getting it because this was really good and it ended in an interesting cliffhanger. And I want to know who this journalist is, or not journalist, the scientist. I want to know who this scientist is, and if I was right. If I was right, I have a 50-50 chance. No, 33, 33, 33 in terms of man, woman, non-binary. Ryan La Sala, I need you to put the second book out now. Now. Anyways, loved this book. Really happy with how it progressed. Also, really terrifying. Oh, let me show you a really scary drawing of the coral monsters. This is the picture. I don't know if you can see it well. I hope it focuses. Yeah, right? That's a thing. That's a thing that I have to encounter. So that's fun. The next book I read was The Children by Melissa Albert, which was the book of the month pick for June. See how it glitters. This was a 3.75 out of 5 for me. I will say from like the first half, it was like a 3-ish, close to a 3.5 maybe. But the ending was just really good. I really liked the ending. Anyways, so this is about Gwyn and her brother Ennis, but mainly it's the main character is Gwyn, who is the daughter of a famous children's author who wrote a series called The Ninth City. The series was supposed to be 6 books, but her mother, the author, and her father were killed in a fire in their childhood home before the 6th book could come out. Now, as an adult, Gwyn has ghostwritten a memoir about her past, and now her estranged brother is about to release a art piece about their mother, which worries her because he has adamantly denied talking about their childhood for years. So Gwyn has issues with that. This book has a dual timeline with Gwyn in the past and Gwyn in the present. And Gwyn in the past is, her growing up in this childhood home that burned down eventually, and as her mother begins writing and becoming famous for her books. And then the future, the other timeline, is Gwyn as an adult trying to market this memoir that she has ghostwritten. She had ghostwritten for her, that's it. And it's the timeline for younger Gwyn. Love it, because it's, a young child in this new location that there may or may not be some sort of supernatural thing happening in the house. But as an adult, the other timeline, I'm so bored. I don't care about Gwyn and her issues with her marketing and her issues with her brother and stuff like that. Like, yeah, her issues with her brother are interesting, but the way that they go about it, it's just not that compelling. But seeing her grow up and seeing her learn stuff in her parents' house, seeing her father waste away and become less and less of a person because he's just stuck there, seeing her mother get super famous and super detached, watching her brother grow up because he's older than her, faster than she is. Really interesting, really good, really loved it. I kept comparing it to 10,000 Doors of January. I keep comparing a lot of books to 10,000 Doors of January. So I feel like I need to revisit that book to see if I actually, because I don't have it in my top books, but I keep returning to it in comparison to other books. So I'm like, I might have to return. Anyways, like I said, the dual timeline, I didn't like the adult timeline. However, I did like Gwyn's relationship with her fiance. That there were some moments here and there that dealt with that, and I liked how it was built. And like I said, the beginning of the story, I was not really interested in adult Gwyn, and so comparing that to the other timeline of Gwyn in the past as a child, I was like, I'm not really enjoying this book. This is where the adult Gwyn is where the story is going to end up eventually. So I want to keep reading young Gwyn, but I know that it's going to end up in a place that I don't like. So I'm not enjoying this as much. However, at the end of the story, when we learn about all the reasons why weird things are happening, which there should have been more weird things happening, but the revelation of what type of weird thing is happening is really good. I loved it and more than made up for all of my issues with it. And I feel like this went from a 3.25, or just a 3 to a 3.75 because of that revelation that sort of changed how things are. But I just did not like anything with the adult Gwyn and her issues with her publishing company and stuff like that. I could have gone without that. At the beginning of the book and at the end of the book, there was a snippet, a section from the Ninth City story that her mother wrote. Edith Sharp. Yeah, it's Guinevere Sharp and Edith Sharp wrote Ninth City. It's like a page and a half of a story, and it was single-handedly the most interesting thing in this book. This is where it starts, and this is where it ends, and then we get into the normal prose here. And that small section, and then the section at the very end, was the most interesting thing in this story. That I'm kind of like, hey, Melissa Albert, can we read the Ninth City? Because that's a lot more interesting than whatever the fuck is happening with Gwyn. I also feel like the ending more than made up for it because it's implying something that I don't quite fully understand. I need to talk to other people who have read this book to be like, hey, did this mean that this thing is happening? Because if it is, that's pretty cool, but also, whoa. But I don't know. I don't think I fully understood what was happening at the end. But, yeah. This was a book that I read 3.75 out of 5. Next, I read Gifted and Talented by Olivie Blake. First of all, hate this cover. Much prefer the hardcover version of this cover. But anyways, this is a 4.5, and this is about three rich siblings who pick up the pieces after their father has died, and the question of who's going to inherit his CEO position of his maybe failing tech mogul business, who will take up that mantle after his death. And I think, like, just looking at the cover of this, at least, and on the hardcover, right, the vibes shown here, and the tagline at the back here says, "When there's a will, there's a war." And at the bottom here, it says, "Money is a family business. Magic is a family curse." Also, they're magical. We'll get to that. I'm reading this, and I'm like, this is some sort of really intense drama between these three siblings that hate each other. But no. I mean, it wants to be that, I think, but it is a lot more comedic than that. I was reading it, I was not really enjoying it at first, but then there was a moment that I was like, this reminds me a lot of Death at a Funeral, a comedy movie that I loved as a child. That I should not have been watching as a child, but I still loved it. And once I reoriented how I was reading it, I was like, okay, this is not a drama. This is a dramedy, right? Then I had a lot more fun with it, right? We have Meredith, Arthur, and I. So this was for a book club. They said that her name was pronounced a specific way. I always forgot what it was. I'm going to call her Eolid because that's how I read her name, but I think it's not that. But Eolid, Meredith, Arthur, and Eolid have different paths in life. Meredith betrayed their father, and became a CEO of a different company and joined forces with a rival company to her father's company. Arthur is the second youngest congressman who is ineffective and has a failing marriage, as it says at the back here, but it's not failing so much. He's in a interesting relationship with his wife, but also is in a throuple with two other people. And then Eolid was a ballerina who had an injury that stopped her from being able to dance, and now just is stuck in a dead-end job working for her father. And it is so messy. It's so funny when you're actually reading this as a comedy. If you're reading this as a drama, you're not going to get that. Or like a serious drama, no. There are so many funny things happening, and I feel like it is an issue of the marketing, of the description, of everything, that this is not saying, hey, this is funny. This is really funny. There are some emotional moments, sure, because it's a death. There are some dramatic moments because it's, oh my god, we're vying for the same position. But overall, above all, it is a comedy. And that's how it should be marketed. This doesn't look like a comedy. This looks like a serious thing that will make me contemplate life. This didn't make me contemplate life. It made me laugh out loud. Some issues I had, the authorial voice here, it's narrated by a omniscient person that ends up being a character within the story that I feel like that wasn't wholly necessary, but I liked how it was implemented. But the voice of it felt a bit too constructed. It reminded me of Harrow the Ninth and how it's narrated. However, Harrow the Ninth felt more, what's the term, less forced than this story. This felt forced in how it was voiced. And from what I've heard, other of Olivie Blake's stories aren't like this, or at least the voice isn't similar to this, so I can feel the hand of the author writing, and it felt forced. The three main siblings were fine. You weren't technically supposed to like them. I did like Eolid a bit more than Arthur and Meredith, but overall, I didn't like them, and I loved the side characters. If you read this book, Jillian, Eves, Julia, Lou, all of the side characters are like really fun, and I really enjoyed their progression and how they like interacted with the main three. I like that. Oh, Jamie also as well, loved him. And yeah, I feel like I was told to read this in a different way, and when I changed how I read it, I had a lot more fun with it. So And also, interesting, for book club, had a lot of very different opinions about this book. So, really interesting. And the copy I have has like art in it, which is really nice. Next, I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which was a book that I started reading in the Pacific Northwest at the beginning of the month. I started. When did I start reading this? I don't remember actually. I started reading. I had taken it with me to the Pacific Northwest, and I barely touched it. Anyways, this is a 4 out of 5. I wanted to read it before I watched the Netflix show, Mike Flanagan, and I thought it was really good for what it wanted to do. From what I've heard, the show is loosely inspired by it, so I'm like, okay, I guess. But anyways, it follows Dr. Montague, who is an investigator who wants to figure out why there's strange things happening at Hill House, who invites 3 people to help him investigate. That is Eleanor, Theodora, and Luke. Eleanor experienced some paranormal things when she was a child. Theodora had some latent not telekinesis, telepathy, I think, or psychic abilities. Latent, she doesn't do anything with it, but she had some at some point. And then Luke, who is the heir of the owners of Hill House, who is sort of like the black sheep. And so the 4 of them are investigating what is happening at Hill House. And I really liked the 4 of them as a crew and how their stories developed. And in Hill House, the horror is really fun. Barely understood some of it, but I feel like it's more about the experience of it than actually like what is actually happening. And I really liked, I got the sapphic undertones between Theodora and Eleanor a lot. I liked that aspect. Luke didn't really do anything for me, but I liked his interactions with everyone else. And then Dr. Montague is a really good character, and I really liked what he did in this story, I liked how the story was progressing, and then around the 3rd act, we get Dr. Montague's wife and some other random guy, Arthur, to come in, and they're just sort of changing the tone of the story in a really interesting. It does liven up the story just a bit more. That I did like. I did enjoy that. But their storylines don't really conclude to anything interesting, and it's mostly focused on them being annoying than anything. And I'm like, if you want them to be annoying, they can be annoying, but also do something to them. I was so excited to see them die. They came in, they're like, there's nothing here happening. There's no supernatural things happening, and I couldn't wait until they were getting killed by the ghosts, but they never did. So I was disappointed in that. And then the ending, I liked it, but it wasn't. I don't know. If you know how it ends, it's I want more from this, but what it is giving me is really good. But Eleanor, Theodora, Dr. Montague, Luke tangentially, really good characters. Really happy with reading this book. Finally, first Shirley Jackson, and now we'll be reading another one later this month. And the last book that I read, at least in the past, is The Fate of Magic by Sara Raasch and Beth Revis, which is the 2nd book in the Night of the Witch duology. No, it's Witch and Hunter duology. The first book was Night of the Witch, which I had to read for a book club, and I liked it enough. I gave that book a 3.75 that I got the sequel of this duology, and this is a 4 out of 5. Overall, I think it is unnecessary, but good. I liked some set pieces that were happening, some important moments and fights and conflicts and stuff. The connective tissue between it is a little iffy, but big important things happening was really entertaining to read. And this is following Fritzi, who has become a champion of one of the gods of the witches, and Otto, who has been chosen to be Fritzi's warrior, who are in love with each other. And they have to deal with the return of Fritzi's psychotic brother, Dieter, who wants to do bad stuff. I had the same issue in the first book, in that Dieter was a cartoonish and one-note antagonist that I could not care less about. He was boring because he was so one note and so cartoonishly evil. He's like, ha ha ha, I'm evil and I'm going to do evil things because I'm evil. And I didn't like that. And it continues here. It does improve in terms of like now we are past the point of Fritzy being conflicted about having a relationship with Otto, and now her and Otto are in this relationship, and Fritzy has some sort of internal struggle with dealing with magic and the gods and stuff like that. It gets a little annoying, but it's necessary for where the story wants to get to. And there were some things that were happening that felt like, okay, this was unnecessary, or this is getting drawn out, but eventually it works out. So that's fine, I guess. Fun magic. I loved the reason why I wanted to continue reading it was seeing how the magic progressed, because Fritzy in the end of the first book, or close to the end of the first book, gets access to really strong, powerful magic, and I wanted to see how that expanded, and it does expand really well in this second book. And so I was really happy with that. Again, it's sort of like romance aspect, not that amazing, but it's there and it's important to the story. At least it worked for the story in of itself. So there's that. And I literally just finished reading this before I started recording this, and I don't have that much to say about this book. So it is a 4 out of 5 because technical aspect, good. I don't see that many wrong things about it. Just don't have any strong emotions about it. It was fine. I enjoyed myself at times reading this. There were some parts I want to say. There were some small moments here and there that I felt not cliche, but were diving into like trope category. Like, for example, there's a moment where Otto gets really excited about like history and starts blabbering about history of like a specific location, and Fritzy sort of looks at him and is like smiling, and it's like, oh my god, he's so cute when he's like rambling about his nerdy interests, and I'm like, that feels constructed because I don't remember him doing this prior. And then also there's a moment where like both of them survive something, and Fritzy's like, are you okay? And Otto's like, am I okay? Are you okay? And that also felt constructed. So I don't know. I kind of noticed those moments that felt a bit too like modern romance cliche, maybe. But overall, they don't have to do the work of building up that relationship anymore. It's there. It's established. They just have to develop it and make it grow. I think they did that a really good job. And the way that the magic expands, like I said, really good. Yeah, when I did my TBR video, I was like, ooh, nice colors. Now there's some books here that I did not expect to read either. So yeah, we'll see how the Tower of Color grows in the future. Happy Pride Month. I don't feel like a human right now, so got some caffeine ready. Alani, sponsor me. The next book that I read was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which is now the second Shirley Jackson book that I've ever read. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I don't really have that many strong opinions about this book. I think that Mary Catherine is a great protagonist. Like, I believe this is supposed to be portraying actual OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I remember reading Janet McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died, and she had OCD as well, where she was compelled to do actions to arbitrarily make something right. And so that you don't usually see, or I've not usually seen at least, in stories. And in this story, Mary Catherine has that type of OCD where she is out burying things, or she is out pinning things on trees, creating magic words. But yes, the story is about I forget their last names actually, the Blackwoods. The Blackwoods, who is Mary Catherine, her sister Constance, and her uncle, whose name I also forgot. Charles is Uncle Julian. Uncle Julian, who is in a wheelchair, who is almost disabled, who have lived in their castle, their house, the Blackwood house, for a long time and are pariahs in the community because Constance was tried and acquitted of having poisoned the rest of their family and killed the rest of the family, with Julian being the only one surviving the poison. And they live, like I said, pariahed in this community, and all of a sudden they're peaceful, exiled life gets disrupted by the arrival of Charles, a cousin of theirs, who is wanting to get some money from their inheritance. I much prefer the beginning than the end, because I liked the build-up of how Mary Catherine and Constance live with each other and with their uncle and with the outside community. The tense relationships that they have with each other is really good. And then Charles comes in and disrupts it, and that's kind of fun as well. But as we keep going, everything develops pretty well, and in ways that I understand why they developed this way, but I just wasn't fully invested in how things developed. Like, I get why at the end, I guess, spoiler alert for this book that came out in 1962, I think I saw, the house gets destroyed by the rest of the community after a small fire that breaks out. And I feel like Charles has this plot relevance that like he comes in and changes stuff and things change because of him. However, none of that is really focused on, and he's just sort of is there. And I think they're trying to imply that he set the fire in the first place, or maybe Mary Catherine set the fire in the first place, but they don't pull focus onto that. And then he sort of just disappears from the story after that, and I wanted more resolution with him. Like, I could have loved to see him be poisoned as well. But overall, I think, it's a pretty straightforward psychological thriller, and I understand why it is a classic foundational book. Did I absolutely love it? No. Did I absolutely hate it? Absolutely not. Technically really well written. It's just pretty good. So it's a 4 out of 5. I don't have no strong emotions about it. It was a pretty quick read as well. Also, something I wanted to note, like I said, I read Haunting of Hill House. I wanted the castle to be a more present character, quote unquote, as the Hill House was, but I didn't feel like it was anything. Like, we have always lived in Castle is such a striking title that I wanted the castle itself to be a character. But it wasn't that well described. More it was the interior decorations I was focused on, and mostly it was framed by what the characters had to do inside the building, like clean and organize and stuff like that. But the actual facade and house itself felt like a house, but not anything enigmatic like the Hill House. So I feel like I'm missing that aspect as well. I wanted the castle to be this imposing thing, but it was just a house. The next book that I read was Shattering the Lay by Josh Palmatier. Now, this one I had gotten as a resale from my local library for like 10 cents. And I've gotten this with a bunch of other ones. And this was the one book out of the many of those that I've gotten that I've been hesitant to start because of how thick it is and how confusing the synopsis was about. Overall, it is about this sci-fi fantasy world, not our world, that uses ley lines to power creations and buildings. It's not, I don't believe it is like our ley lines, which I believe is a theory of energy flow in our world. In their world, ley lines are actual natural flows of energy. And so people have learned how to harness that energy and use that energy to build building. That's what's happening in this cover. This tower is being built. You can probably see, I'll get a digital version of it. You can see it closer. There are crowds of people watching this happen. This is an event that happens early in the book. And the story is revolving around Kara, who is a young woman who learns that she is one of the few people who is able to manipulate the ley and be able to control and shift the ley. It's not an exclusive skill. There are a bunch of, like, when you end up having this affinity, you get put to work as a wielder of the ley, capital W, wielder, which is like, I want to say maybe it's like a specialized engineering job, right? And then there's also, they don't explore much about it, but there's also people in the university who explore the tapestry, which I believe is the topography of the ley. There's some, the world building, the magic system's kind of confusing here. So I'm trying to make sense of it, but at least energy, she knows how to control the energy, yeah. And then we also follow Alan, who is part of the police force of the, see, this is also why it's complex, because this is like a country but not a country. It's a city but not a city. It's a large city-state, I believe. And the Baron is the main antagonist. Baron Aren't has a contingent of police force called dogs, and they have an alpha, and Alan is a new dog coming in to be this. It's basically just a police force, but it has like the theming of having the alpha wolf dog hound thing, you know. And then he eventually has a family in this city. And like I keep saying, the world building and the magic, the lore is very complex, but the way that it's laid out is pretty good. I gave this book a 3.75 out of 5 because it was pretty good. However, I think that if you want to have such a complex world and magic system, I think your story, your plot needs to be a lot less complex, a lot more simpler, because it jumps time periods. And I think that cuts the pacing and the investment as I was reading it, because we go from Kara being like 12 years old and like she learns she can have this power, and then Alan as a new dog, and then it jumps to, I think it was 7 or 8 years later, 10 or something like that. Kara is, if she was 12 and then she was 18, so that's 6 years later. That's it. Math. It jumps 6 years later to when she's about to graduate from being a wielder, and then Alan is like being a dog and he's being a policeman, and then stuff happens, and then it jumps again. I think it was 18, 5 to 6 years later to Kara being like 20, early 20s. Alan has defected, and his daughter is now 12 years old, who was born, actually it was 12 years, I think, because she was just recently born in the middle. Anyways, the plot, really complex, and I think that it was a disservice to my enjoyment of this story and how complex the world is, because worlds that are this strange and weird can work if it's laid out in a story that is simple and easy to follow. But with the story keep jumping ahead in time and keep you like, you have your mindset, okay, these characters at this point in time, and then you learn with them about the world. But then we jump another year, and now you have to reorient your mind with this new set of characters. They're the same characters but older, so they're changed. And then you also have to readjust, okay, what has changed with the world? And I feel like it should have just been Kara and Alan as adults. I think it should have been, you know, Kara being a proficient wielder about to become a prime, a leading figure in the wielders, and then Alan being a defected, and have everything that they've experienced before as backstory. And that would have made everything a lot more tighter and a lot more interesting to read. I do like the conflict here because we have, like I said, the primes, who are the people above the wielders. The primes don't have a specific hierarchy, but there is a main prime, but he's not named anything else except for prime. Prime Augustus, the Baron Arendt, and then the captain of the dogs, Daedalus. They are working together to gain power. And at the same time, they are fighting against a different city-state's Baron. I forget his name. I think it was Leith or something. At the same time that there is a stateless entity of the Cormanli, a religious organization, Cormanli, that seeks to destroy the power network and break the Baron's chokehold on the lay. They are a religious organization that believes that what the Baron, the Prime, and the Captain are doing is unnatural to the state of the world. And so they are doing terrorism against the state. And I feel like that conflict, the three of them, is really interesting because Kara and Alan are not interacting with that conflict that much, but they are affected by it. Kara is more along the lines of the Baron and the Prime mostly because, dealing with the leg and stuff. And then she has a mentor who was part of the Cormanli, and then Alan was a dog who was hunting the Cormanli, but then he left because everything's being very dangerous. So it's very militaristic power and cops hurting a lot of people, and so stuff like that. So I like that conflict, and I like the idea of this warping and changing of the natural energy to help make buildings and sustain your city and stuff like that could be seen as unnatural. What happens when that ley is shattering the ley? I don't know how quite to say this. I feel like this book doesn't have a bite to it or a spark to it. It is, in a way, critiquing different things, and not every book has to critique things, but art is political. This has politics to it. It's all of that, yes. However, I feel like it doesn't have that much passion behind it beyond just I want to write this really interesting story. Like, yes, it's critiquing police states, it's critiquing religion, it's critiquing corruptions in positions of power, but it's not saying anything new beyond just the world is new. I was reading and I was like this is good, but I'm not getting anything new from this beyond just interesting world building. This book is very similar in concept and themes to Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. I think that, well, in the both characters in Shiona in Blood Over Brighthaven and Kara in here are basically savants in manipulating the magic system. But I think Shiona and in Blood Over Brighthaven, the story does more with what it wants to do. And this one, I just feel like it's kind of going through the motions and just having fun with it, but not really doing anything purposeful, if that makes sense. I don't know. I was reading this, I was like, this is good, but it could be better. One, if it had more simple story. And I think with simpler story could have helped it deliver a more personal and passionate critique, but it just got bogged down by trying to set things up, and then knock everything down. But it just didn't need all that, It is a part of a trilogy. It's book 1 of 3, and I have bought the second book. I don't think I will read it. However, I think next year it will be part of the series that I want to complete. Because I think it has merit, and I want to talk about it. But there are other books that I want to read more in place of the second book of this one. Also, I read this, and we have Always Lived in the Castle about the same time. Both books threatened to give me a reading slump, but it was like this. It's technically good, but I don't have very strong emotions about it. This one's flawed, but I have some strong emotions about it. So I was like, really interesting contrast here, but it is what it is. Next, I read Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey, the third book in the Expanse series. This is coming off of the events of Caliban's Gate, which is where the protomolecule off of Venus has created a ring next to Uranus. And at the beginning of this book, a thrill seeker, a adrenaline junkie, wants to ride into the ring for clout, and he ends up crashing. And that causes issues now. And so Earth, Mars, and the Belt want to show up and make a force just in case something comes out, trying to figure it out. At the same time, Holden and his crew are somehow manipulated to come here, and someone is trying to take Holden down. That's the synopsis of this story. This book I did not quite enjoy as much as the first 2 books. It's still pretty good. I gave it a 4.25. I gave Caliban's War and Leviathan's Gate 4.5 each. I think emotionally, Caliban's War is more 4.75. But like technical things, like third act things, should be more 4.5. Anyways, so far I've seen the formula. The first book and the second book had Holden POV, and then POVs of different characters. In the first book, it was just Miller, and in the second book, it was Bobby, Asavarala, and Prax. Those three in Cabinspore were really, really good side characters. Here we have Anna, Melba / Clarissa, and Bull. And I don't really enjoy these three new characters as much as I did the last book. I think Anna is a very strong character. She is a priest with a wife and a child, and she is very passionate, and she has wisdom along with a charisma that is not like charismatic, but able to connect with people, and I liked that aspect. Bull, I didn't get much from him. He is he's the third in line on the it's not the Nauvoo anymore, it's the Behemoth, the huge ship sent by the OU to be a show force around the ring, that was sent by the Belt by Fred Johnson, Holden's former employer. That's the connection there. He's a third in command there, and he's trying to, he's the security officer, that's it. And he's trying to keep the peace and stuff there, and then, like, when shit hits the fan, you know. And for him, I just didn't really get anything from his character. It was just guy who is tired with the world, but knows how to work with people, and does his job what he wants to do. Gruff man type archetype. And then Melba / Clarissa is the daughter of Jules, what's his name? Jules something Mao, who is the father of Julie Mao, who is the woman who basically started the protomolecule situation in the first book. Clarissa / Melba feels too cartoony and feels too crazy, and I can understand like trying to write some sort of mental illness with her or something, but I just didn't get a good grasp of her character, and I think it was just too much for what this story wants, because this sci-fi story is very grounded in sci-fi, which is contrasted by the fantastical elements of the protomolecule and what it does. So when we have this character who's just not connected there, and it's just sort of like crazy, I don't find enjoyment with it. The sci-fi stuff of the ring was really cool, and I really liked everything there. Holden here feels a bit more selfish, but I understand why. I understand why his character develops this way, and I like it. I don't quite enjoy it, but I like it. Does that make sense? It's very much like, yeah, I see why this is happening, and it sucks that everything has happened to him, and so he's acting this way because of that. Emotionally, oh no, that sucks, but also, technically, hey, that's really good writing, you know? I think had really fun setting with the ring, and a lot of this is set in the Behemoth, which is a huge, like I said, it was supposed to be the Nauvoo, which was a huge, I forget, generation ship, is that what it's called? Yes, where it was supposed to be for Mormons who were going to go into the vast space and hopefully colonize a different planet, and also spread their Mormonism, but the OU took it and made it the Behemoth as like big huge tank. Really fun setting there. And then the story is also pretty fun. The plot is really interesting, with all of these different political forces sort of trying to have a big show of their strength, and then Melba comes in and messes things up, and everyone goes into the ring, and that's also really fun. I could feel a sense of lagging of the pace of like things are starting to be a little slow. However, the way that was rectified was a simple mutiny-esque plot that I didn't quite enjoy. It was good, it was well written, I just didn't, it was like a simple sci-fi plot I've seen before, of well, they've mutinied already, but let's stop this counter mutiny, or there's a counter mutiny is what they called it, which was kind of fun. A counter coup is what they called it. But I was like, this is just, now we're back to groups of people fighting each other in space in one huge building, and I've seen this before in many different places, so it wasn't anything special. Not like the plots of the first two books, you know? I really liked how, like I said, this story is very grounded. I've heard a lot about this is a space opera, and I'm thinking compared to other space operas like Star Wars. However, a lot of the plot is contingent on, plot and conflict is contingent on hard sci-fi elements, which I really like compared to Star Wars. Like the biggest thing to worry about in Star Wars in terms of hard sci-fi is space, the vacuum. Don't the ship explodes and then you die, right? Here, same thing, ship explodes and you die. However, we have this sci-fi thing of deceleration. Like we've set it up before in the first two books, how you have to be strapped in and make sure you don't fucking die, get squashed by the ship being slowed down or speeding up or stuff like that. And I like how that's been set up already in the first two books. And here we get a really interesting new thing. We've seen the protomolecule change physics in really scary ways. And here, there's a moment that I absolutely adored, which was when the ships are going at a specific speed because they know that they can't go a higher speed because the ring, the slow zone, has slowed things down to a specific speed. But because of actions that happen within the protomolecule Holden, and then like he's attacked by some Marines, the safe zone lowers its speed even further, which means any ships that are going at a higher speed are slowed to that lower speed in ways that physics should not be able to do, but because this is sci-fi alien stuff, really cool that they can do that. Because of that, the effects of that are catastrophic. And that's really interesting, really fun to see how hard sci-fi, the science of it, of like instant deceleration in a way that is not physically possible, like through physics, but through alien magic, that has consequences on the human body. And seeing that happen was really cool. So yeah, really excited to keep reading this series. I'm excited. I want better characters. These side characters were not it that much. I do not want Melba to continue to return. I don't want her to come back. Anna, I feel like she could come back, but I'm okay if not. It's Asavrala, Bobby that I want to come back. Maybe Prax, but I don't see that happening. Oh, and Miller's back too? Alright. I guess. At least here he was pretty cool compared to who I was in the first book. The next book that I read was A Madness So Discreet by Mandy McGinnis, which is a book that I reread from, I believe I read it in high school. And I gave this a 3.75 out of 5. This is a YA thriller about Grace, who is a mental patient in an asylum sent there because she got pregnant out of wedlock. And due to skills that she is able to show, she is hired by a doctor who takes her as his patient, Dr. Thornhollow, and she helps him solve crimes, and it starts the process of criminal psychology. I don't know exactly if this is like supposed to say like this is where criminal psychology started, or Dr. Thornhollow is one of the few many people who want to do criminal psychology, and so he is proving that it works through his investigations. Something like that. I'm one of those two. Technically, he's pretty good, really strong. Grace is a really interesting character. I don't want to say that I don't have a grasp of a character because she doesn't have that much of a character because she is such a traumatized blank slate, but you get a sense of how much pain that she's in and the skill that she has as well, because she has to pretend to be insane to have people not pay attention to her so that she can be invisible, basically, and also perceive and remember things and do criminal psychology with Thornhollow. And Thornhollow and Grace complement each other and their weaknesses and strengths. You know, I liked the beginning a lot more than the end because we have Grace in the asylum and she's, you know, trying to survive there. And then she is working with Thornhollow, and that aspect, and then her new asylum, making friends in the new asylum, really interesting. However, this book goes from criminal investigation to all of a sudden criminal court case drama, almost similar to a SVU Law and Order type of story where you investigate and then first half and then the second half is the courtroom case. However, the investigations are tangentially related to what happens in the court case. And the court case is when they are trying to send her father, Grace's father, to jail for plot reasons. That is kind of spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about that much. I did not want that. I thought this was going to be like a retelling, rewriting, whatever, similar to Sherlock Holmes, and Grace is Watson, I guess, whatever. I thought this was going to be a serial killer story. Like, they are focused on trying to find this serial killer, and it starts like that because they have these two bodies that they find, and they can't figure out what this killer is. This criminal psychology is not linking up, and their investigations aren't linking up. But then it resolves itself, and then it turns into this court drama completely separate than that, tangentially related, but separate. I wanted more investigation. I wanted more actual criminal investigating and trying to find this madman, this serial killer, someone whose madness is so discreet, but the madness that is so discreet is her father. And I'm like, I don't care about that. I wanted more of this serial killer thing. I mean, look at this cover. You know what? Same thing. I'm going to show a digital version of it that you can see it. She has that hand coming out from the below, grabbing her leg. I don't know what that's even supposed to signify. That tells me something supernatural is happening, but it's not. There's nothing supernatural happening here. So I'm not fully sure what this cover is supposed to be doing. I'm wanting something, and it's giving me something else. So there's a lot of disconnect there. There were some things here. This is a young adult thriller. I think it's trying to also be a horror. There's not enough. There's definitely not enough horror here to be a horror. Maybe a thriller. It's YA. Some content things here are very extreme that I actually would not want to give this to someone who is a young adult like my sister. Like I've talked about, I want to give some books to my sister. I don't think I want to give this to her because there's some content things here that even I, a homosexual who's 26 years old, 25, I'm fine with content. I'm fine with sexual things, gruesome things, taboo things, things that you would not show your grandma who would make her faint. I'm fine with that at times. Love horror. I love horror movies, stuff like that. But some content here felt very extreme. Not extreme in terms of like gore, splatter, punt. No. There is a character who has syphilis, which is fine, you know. I mean, it's not fine for her. In the story, during this time, asylums were not just for insane people, or at least the definition of insane people was very broad. They would send people who were actually mentally ill, but also women who became pregnant out of wedlock, such as Grace, women who became independent and wanted to not be tied down by men who were deemed insane and sent to an asylum, like a handful of characters here. Women who became ill and have not been able to get help because they're poor, or the means that they got ill are deemed unnatural or improper for women, such as syphilis or sexually transmitted diseases. All of that is really important discussions to be had about history and how asylums during this time, some of them tended to be a lot very bad. This specific asylum that she goes to in Ohio, and then she was in a different one in Boston. The Boston asylum was really bad, but the Ohio one was really good. The Ohio one is based on the Athens Lunatic Asylum. That is actually an institution that treated their patients with respect, but the one in Boston did not. So that one had deplorable conditions. Anyways, all of that content, interesting, good, fun, but there's a character here who is in the asylum because she has syphilis. She got syphilis from having sex with a man. Yeah. But she talks about how she took revenge on him by going around and having sex with the rest of his family and giving them syphilis. And that's framed as a girl power moment, good for you type moment. That felt very weird, very extreme, and was a lot. And I balk at that because the way that it's framed as a good thing that she did that, but that would be illegal. You know, good for her would be go kill them. Good for her would be go get some other form of revenge. But actually going around and having sex with them and purposefully infecting them with syphilis feels a bit too much for me. I'm like, this is a YA book for high schoolers. Why are we framing this woman purposely infecting other people while they're having consensual sex? Why is that framed as a girl power moment? I don't think that should be. That's the big thing here I want to say, that I feel like a bit too much for a YA book. You know what I mean? Beyond that, content things is the rest of this is fine. Like, Grace kills somebody, that's cool, good for her. She like has to cut herself and have like scars to free herself. Really intense moment. That's good for this tone of story. But depending on the story, depending on the tone, depending on your audience, different things have different weight to it. But anyways, was going to give this away to my sister. I'm not, for that reason and other reasons as well. I did enjoy this story. Overall, I felt like as I was reading this, I would have preferred to be reading instead The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, because I feel like it's trying to do the same idea as this book, but better. In that Grace here seems to have a photographic memory. I'm not sure if it's trying to imply that she has actual photographic memory or that she's just really good at memorizing things. Either or, in Tainted Cup, actual photographic memory through scientific means, really much more better there, and a lot more enigmatic setting and stuff. But I think this is a interesting, good story with some issues here and there. So yeah, these are all the 11 books that I read this month. I will say this moment here felt like I was going to have a reading slump. Shirley Jackson's really good. However, I guess, it's a classic, so classics you have to read them a little different. I don't think I was reading them how they should be read. And then book club and book of the month, complicated, good but complicated. But Burning God, Dead of Summer, Abaddon's Gate, I knew they were going to be good, and they were good. So yeah, if you have read any of these books, please let me know. I have a TBR and a book tag coming out. I think I'm going to put those out after this. Something like that. I'm not fully sure. But July has started. I'm a little late on putting this video out. I'm so sorry. But I've had a lot to read. And I am so ready for more of The Expanse. I'm so ready for finishing up a lot of different stories. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to be passionate. And I'll see you later. Say goodbye to Junior. And say goodbye to Sandy, Avatar of the Hunt. Ah!